friends, I'm gonna gather us and offer a word of welcome. Let me say welcome tonight to New York Avenue Presbyterian Church and to tonight's McClendon Scholar in Residence program. I'm Reverend Sarah Johnson. I'm the senior pastor here at New York Avenue, and it is my privilege to welcome you tonight, whether you are joining us here in the sanctuary or where you are one of the many faces who is joining us online tonight through our webinar format, and perhaps that's somewhere in the DMV or perhaps even around the globe. What a joy it is to have you with us tonight, no matter where you are, and to engage in this conversation. You might have been to NYAPC before, or you may be new in our midst. And either way, again, want to say a word of welcome and a word of invitation and introduction about our congregation. We are an inclusive community of faith here at the heart of the nation's capital, and we seek with humility and faith to engage in God's transformative work of challenging the powerful, of standing with the oppressed, lifting up the brokenhearted, and making God's love and God's justice visible to all. In addition to tonight's program and many other ministry opportunities, ways to engage with us and with the community, we do worship every Sunday here in the sanctuary at 10 a.m. and also as well as online. And so if your travels, if your life bring you into DC or bring you this way, or you are looking for a place to find a spiritual home, I also want to extend that word of welcome to you and to know that all are welcome, and we hope you'll take the opportunity to join us on Sundays at 10 a.m. for worship. Tonight's program is part of a legacy and of a tradition of former Associate Pastor Reverend Jack McClendon, who served here for many decades. And Jack had a vision that for people of faith to invite thought leaders and scholars to engage in faithful ways with the issues of the day. As we gather tonight to hear from Dr. Raheb, we are standing firmly in that tradition to engage our humanity and our faith with the deep issues of today. As we prepare for tonight's program, just a few words of hospitality. I think Theo may do this, and so he may repeat these words for you. But if you are looking for a restroom tonight, please feel free, if you were in person, to get up and to do what you need to do. Restrooms are located through either of these doors, these red doors behind me there, and we hope you feel at home and welcome here. As we gather tonight, let me open us and start us with a word of prayer. Let us pray. Holy God, as we gather this evening, we pause to acknowledge your presence among us. We come this night with open hearts and minds, seeking your guidance and wisdom as we embark on the journey of learning and reflection. We lift up the people and communities impacted by the conflict and suffering, particularly those in Gaza and the broader Middle East. Grant them solace and hope and inspire us to be instruments of peace and justice in our own lives and in the world. Bless our time tonight with meaningful discussion and insight. May our efforts and our presence be guided by your compassion and our actions reflect your grace. Help us to listen deeply, to think critically, and to act courageously. Thank you for Mitri's presence with us tonight. Open our hearts to be challenged and inspired by his wisdom, and that we may be so transformed to live by the spirit of your truth and your love. Amen.
Thank you, Sarah. I want to add my welcome to all of those who've joined us here in downtown Washington, D.C. for this gathering, as well as the many who are joining us via webinar. We have almost 800 people signed up for this webinar, and most of them are with us now live. You can't see them, those of us who are here, but they are out there. And those not able to join us live will be getting a recording of this later, and we'll see it later. So the reach of the program is even much greater than those who have gathered here. As we begin, I do want to take a minute and learn a little bit more about who's with us. For those of you online, I invite you to type in your name, where you are. We like seeing what part of the country and sometimes around the world people are, where they live or who are joining us. And maybe if you're with a particular organization or congregation, type that in also. We always look at that, and it's good to know who's part of our broader community attending our programs. And for those of you here, I want to invite you to take just a minute and stand up or lean over and greet somebody near you. This is a church, after all, and we want to do a little passing of the peace here. Just say hello to someone maybe you don't know while those online are typing in their names. Okay, if we could come back together. I hope those of you who are here maybe have met someone you can talk with afterwards and get to know a little bit at the conclusion of the evening. Most of you are people who are familiar with the McClendon Scholar Program. I think we have some people joining us both here and online for the first time, but most of you have been to our programs before. And you know that throughout the year, we sponsor programs with Christian scholars and authors and activists who educate us and challenge us to be more effectively engaged in the world. I want to mention briefly as we begin some exciting fall programs we have, just so you're aware of them, and we'll be telling you much more about these later on. But we have 3 programs lined up this fall. We're excited about each of them. Brian McLaren, who was with us for 2 webinars in the spring, will be here in person for the weekend of October 5 and 6. Brian, a well-known author and lecturer. Many of you are familiar with his whole range of work. Then on November 2nd and 3rd, we'll have Dr. Brian Blunt, who was formerly the president of Union Presbyterian Seminary, a noted New Testament scholar. He again will be with us for the entire weekend. And then we just confirmed this week that E.J. Dion of the Washington Post is going to be with us after the election to talk about the election results and help us make sense of whatever is going on after the election this fall. This is the 3rd time in a row we've had E.J. We had him after the 2016 election, after 2020, and he said this is a tradition he wants to keep going. So he's going to be with us again probably the first week of December. We'll let you know when we have the exact date. But great programs, and if you want to learn more about our other programs, you can go to our website. You see it here on the screen, nyapc.org/MSIR, and it tells you about upcoming programs and also has recordings of many of the great scholars we've had in the past, and the recording of this evening's program will be added to that very soon. So the goal of all our programs is to make presentations on programs we sponsor that are as timely and relevant as possible. And tonight's topic is certainly something that for many people is front and center in our thoughts and concerns. That is because, of course, we hear and see about the tragedy in Gaza on an almost daily basis. One organization that is working to educate people about what is happening in Gaza and throughout the region is Churches for Middle East Peace. And we're delighted to have them as a co-sponsor of the program this evening. They've helped to plan and promote this program, and later we'll hear briefly from them about how individuals and congregations can be constructively engaged on the topics we'll be talking about tonight. And we're particularly grateful and pleased to have 2 Palestinian Christian leaders who work with Churches for Middle East Peace with us this evening, Dr. Lama Mansour and Father Fadi Diab. And we'll introduce them to you later, and you'll give you a chance to hear from them also briefly near the end of the program. Now, after Reverend Mitri Raheb speaks, we'll have time to take some questions from those of you who are here in the congregation. And the way we want to do that is to have you write out your questions, and we ask that they be both legible and succinct. And then we'll collect them if you have questions and sort through and ask Reverend Raheb as many questions as we can in the time that we have. We have cards that should be on the back of pews that are there. If you don't have one and you want a card, raise your hand wherever you are right now. Does everybody have access to a card? We also have pens if you need one. So if you need either, if you anticipate wanting to write out a question, we encourage you to do so. And then after his presentation, we'll take a moment, collect the cards, look through them, and we should have several minutes to go through a number of the questions and talk with Reverend Raheb after his remarks. Now, for those of you online, we invite you to also type questions into Q&A so that those who are online can see the questions that are coming to mind, and also so we can tally them and gather them after this and make it part of our report on the evening. We always look at the questions and comments that are made online. So if everybody is set, if you do need a pen or pencil, raise your hand here. Seems people are set with their ability to write out questions. Be thinking of a question you want to ask. If you don't know how to word it, maybe you just say, well, I'd like to hear a little bit more about this topic you raised, or I'd like you explain this a little bit more clearly, and that'll let us know what kind of things we ought to explore. So let me again say how glad we are you're here with us this evening, both in person and online, and I want to invite Reverend Sarah Johnson now to introduce Mitri Raheb.
Thank you, Theo. I have the great honor and privilege tonight of formally introducing Mitri Raheb to us. Mitri, you are, I have the privilege of also calling you friend. What a joy it is to have you tonight for the McClendon Scholar Program and here with us at New York Avenue and in Washington. Mitri is a distinguished theologian, an author, and an advocate for peace who has dedicated his life to addressing the profound challenges facing the Middle East, and particularly in his native Palestine. As a leader in the Evangelical Lutheran Church, Mitri has been at the forefront of efforts to promote understanding and reconciliation, to foster hope amidst conflict. His scholarly work and passionate commitment to justice offer invaluable insights into the complexities of the region, and his voice is one of both profound wisdom and practical experience, especially for people of faith. I first met Mitri as a young pastor, having been introduced to his scholarly work, and then to his broader ministry on behalf of the people of Palestine, and particularly the young people of Palestine. What I have learned from Mitri over the years has deeply impacted my faith and the ways that I show up in the world as a human being and also as a Christian. Mitri has challenged me to reshuffle and to complicate my narratives. He has introduced me to wonderful people and also to inconvenient truths. One of the ways that has happened is through an organization called Bright Stars of Bethlehem, which you will hear a little bit more about tonight. Bright Stars supports the education and gifts of young people in Palestine through arts and culture. It fosters hope and restores humanity and bridges relationships across divides. If you are like me, as Theo mentioned, the conflict in Palestine, both past and present, often remains at the forefront of our minds. Many people have said to me over the weeks, I feel overwhelmed. I'm not sure how to engage, or what can I do? Part of the encouragement that I'd like to offer you tonight is to learn more about Bright Stars as you leave. The motto of Bright Stars is, hope is what we do. It is a way, again, to connect people, human beings, across time and geography, and also to make impacts for hope. Mitri, we are so privileged to have you with us tonight to share your perspective and to engage in profound and meaningful conversation as we chart a path forward for a more compassionate and just world. Welcome, friend. Come on.
Good evening. Sarah, thank you for this invitation, for your friendship, for the partnership, and for organizing this evening. Thank you, Theo, for all the work that you have been putting to make this happen. I have to say, thank you for coming on this night where you have the big presidential debate in 2 hours, I guess, or 3 hours. But you made it here to hear about the Middle East, which, by the way, a term I really don't like at all because it's middle of where and east of what, right? I mean, this is a Eurocentric colonial perspective of our region. And for me, it's really an honor to be speaking in this church with such a great history and tradition. And I hope that what I will do tonight will give you maybe an insight into what's happening in Palestine, not only now, but in the last 100 years. So the first part of my presentation actually will be focusing on my latest book, Decolonizing Palestine, that I think will be sold there. But the second part is from my upcoming book, so you will be the first to hear those actually insights. So the topic is understanding Gaza, political context and theological challenges. I would like to start how best to describe the situation in Israel and Palestine. And usually people like to refer to it as a conflict. But really it's not a conflict, because conflict implies you have two people fighting about something. But it's really not that. And sometimes I hear people thinking that this is a religious war between Jews and Muslims, which it is also not. I think on CNN you have it as a war between Israel and Hamas. And when you hear this, it's clear you are on the side of Israel, right? So framing is important. And the one word that I really hate is the word complicated. People like to say, this is complicated, which means we cannot comprehend, it is unsolvable, and I don't want to bother dealing with it. And usually this is brought by pro-Israeli group who wants to actually take you away from discussing the issue. Interestingly enough, I never ever heard the word complicated when it comes to the Ukraine. It's crystal clear, right? You have an occupier occupying another country, and you are in support of the occupied. In Palestine, it's a different story. So the framing that I would like to use is settler colonialism. This is actually what's happening in Palestine. And I think if we don't understand it, we cannot really solve it. And I hope you will bear with me to work together to show you how settler colonialism have been actually the main issue in Palestine. And so I will start with a political context. Now, settler colonialism actually is different than classical colonialism. Classical colonialism is like when the French went to Algiers to occupy it for a certain time and then to go back to France. Settler colonialism, there are settlers, they go to another country with the intention to stay there for good, not to go and leave. And with the ultimate aim to replace the native people, not to live with them, to replace them. This is important. And secondly, in this context, the native people, they became aliens at home, and the settlers, they become like the natives. This is when you hear Israelis saying, Jews going back to their homeland. That is how they become suddenly the natives, and we, the Palestinians, we become the aliens, as if we don't belong there. And in this context, the land is described as an empty or barren land that is just waiting to be discovered, thus becoming the private property of the settlers. This is what's happening in the West Bank and what has been happening in Gaza. And the native people are depicted with all racist constructs. They are the savage, the violent, the terrorists, while the settlers are portrayed as the civilized and brave pioneers. And to defend the settler property from the savage, a police state has to be created and granted extraordinary power over the native people, including power over their civil affairs. And so, to sum up, in settler colonial context, the settlers, they want all the geography, but they don't want the native demography. And to do that, they have to develop an apartheid system, because otherwise you cannot actually control this. Now, I guess settler colonialism as a concept is not foreign to you, right? It rings a bell somehow. But this is really the context we live in Palestine. And to understand this, the process of settler colonization of Palestine, I would like to focus on 5 different stages where we can see this. And in all these stages, you can see where religion actually has been also part of the problem. So the first stage is what I call seeding the seeds for this project. And the seeds for this project, actually, it wasn't a Jewish project to start with. It was a British project. And it was a colonial project. So it was in the middle of the 19th century that Britain actually, as part of its imperial outlook, they thought the Ottoman Empire is collapsing. That was the weak old man was called. And Britain wanted actually to replace and to get chunks from this large Ottoman imperium. And so they wanted to take over Palestine, but they didn't want to do it themselves. They wanted to use European Jews as subcontractors for this settler colonization. So it was supposed to be Jewish Europeans to send them to Palestine as subcontractors within the imperial framework of Great Britain. And here again you can see all the elements of settler colonialism in, for example, the words of Earl Shaftesbury. He was one of the politicians in the British Empire, and you can see he wrote a country without a nation for a nation without a country. Now, the country was not without a nation because there were Palestinians living there. And the nation, the Jews, were not without a country because they were European Jews. But Europe didn't want to see Jews as part of Europe. And so they wanted to send them basically to Palestine as subcontractor. So this is how it started, as an imperial British project. This would have been, a nice idea if it were not for Lord Balfour. 1917, the Balfour Declaration actually giving Palestine as a homeland for the Jewish people. I always like to say for theologians, it wasn't the Lord God that promised Israel the land. It was Lord Balfour. These are two different kinds of lords, right? Lord God is Lord God. Lord Balfour is empire. In this quotation, you can see that Lord Balfour actually is saying his intention was not only political but also religious. He wanted to do something good for the Jewish people by sending them away to Palestine. And especially, he was actually concerned about the Russian Jews. There were pogroms in Russia. These were poor Jewish people, and he didn't want the poor Jewish people to flood Britain. So he said, this is not your land, but remember God promised you a land called Palestine. Go there. It's like, Trump when he wanted not to have any Mexican immigrants, but Scandinavian immigrants, right? So something similar did actually Lord Balfour. Now, this wasn't what actually many Jewish people thinking. You have, a very famous thinker and philosophers, Jewish philosophers, who thought, no, it doesn't really make sense for us as Jews to go there as settler colonialists, but we can go there to share the land with the Palestinians. And so some voices were talking about a binational state, like Martin Buber, the famous Jewish philosopher. Unfortunately, usually people don't listen to prophets like Martin Buber and others until today. The second stage was taking the land. In 1948, through the Nakba, 77% of Palestine was occupied, mainly the coastal region. Over 520 villages were destroyed. Over 800,000 people were displaced. And in that year, there was a debate in Israel what to call this new state. And there were many ideas. Herzliya was one, Zion was another, and actually it was only at the last minute that Ben Gurion came up with the idea to call it Israel, which created for us Palestinians and Palestinian Christians a big problem. Because people in the pew today, when they hear in the church something about Israel in the Bible, and then they go watch CNN and they hear about the state of Israel, they always confuse biblical Israel with the state of Israel. And so that creates a problem for us. Now, 10 years, in 1958, when Israel was celebrating its 10th anniversary, Ben Gurion, the president of the state of Israel, to celebrate this, started a Bible study group. Imagine. And he invited to this Bible study group military generals, rabbis, archaeologists, strategists, and few Christian Zionists. Among them, the famous Albright, the archaeologist. If you go to Jerusalem, there is an Albright Institute. So here you can see even Albright, he's on the side. And they chose one book from the Bible, from the Hebrew Bible. Interestingly enough, they chose the Joshua book. And the debate between them was, do we need first to conquest the land and then settle? Or do we need first to build settlements and slowly take over the conquest? That was the debate, and they couldn't actually agree. But it's interesting that they chose this book, and I will come back to this book. It's a very important book in all what we are thinking, because the book of Joshua provides the blueprint for any settler colonial project. And by the way, it wasn't the Jews who created this I mean, it was the Christians who used this book to colonize so many countries in the world. So the third stage is what I call expanding the boundaries. That was 1967, when Israel occupied the West Bank, the Sinai, and the Golan Heights, including Jerusalem. And the name that Israel chose for this war was Six-Day War, which again, weaponizing the Bible. Why Six-Day War? Because God, according to Genesis, created the world in 6 days, and then in the seventh day he rested, right? They thought, now we rest. Now, they did not rest as Israeli, nor did we rest since then as Palestinian. And the colonization of what they call Judea and Samaria started, and a new type of leadership emerged, which is the rabbi politicians. Suddenly, rabbis took over the politics, not the secular politicians that they used to have. And in this context, one of the most important military generals was Moshe Dayan. He was actually the general that year. Interestingly enough, also he thought of himself being Joshua. So this is a quotation from him from the early 70s. He wrote a book called Living with the Bible. And there he writes, "We are the biblical generation of the settlement following the Joshua conquest. And the helmet and sword are essential requirements. There will be no life for our children unless we dig shelters, and without the barbed wires fence and the machine gun, we shall be unable to build a home, plant a tree, pave a road, and drill for water." Again, Joshua is an important figure. The fourth stage was what I call negotiating a compromise. That started really in the late 80s, early 90s, and ended in the so-called Oslo Accord. And at that time, the idea was, let's have land for peace. So the idea was Israel should give up the West Bank and Gaza for peace. But like in North America, during the time of treaties, more native lands were taken actually as at the times of war. So the colonization and panthotization of the West Bank actually accelerated after 1993. This is which actually tells me that from the beginning there was this settler colonial idea. And I think this map you are familiar with. You can see slowly how this blue spot that was there in the 19th century slowly is taking over, and how Palestine is disappearing. It's not the Palestinians who are disappearing, because today in historic Palestine, we have more or less 6.5 million Jews and 6.5 million Palestinians. So two groups, equal size, but the Israeli group, they actually control by military means or settlers over 90% of historic Palestine. That is the problem that was also in South Africa. And this is the reality in the West Bank. Just to give you an idea what really colonization mean, just one example, I would like to take you to Bethlehem. That's my hometown, right? This is where Jesus was born. Not in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, just to make sure that. So this was the Bethlehem County, 1967, when Israel occupied Bethlehem. And this is West Bank. This is not Israel, okay? Now look what happened. First, Israel annexed the northern part of Bethlehem, and so we lost that part. And in the first 40 years, Israel built 19 Jewish settlements, colonies, on Bethlehem land. If you look carefully where they are built, most of them in the southwest corner of Bethlehem. Why southwest corner? Because this is the most fertile area in Bethlehem. This is our food basket. And then you have 3 settlements like in the middle of nowhere. You see them on the screen. Why are they there? Because they sit on the largest underground water aquifer. So the Israeli, they sit on the water and along the Dead Sea because they control tourism, etc. And what you see here in blue, actually this is a military area, fully under Israeli military control. So we have there no power. And this brown area, we are not allowed even to be there because this is a closed military area. And then Israel built these two bypass roads, which are roads that bypass Palestinian towns but connect Jewish settlements together. But in this case, actually, they confined Bethlehem. We are not allowed anymore to build as Palestinians on the outside areas of the two roads. So basically, Bethlehem is confined to a very small area. You can see how Jewish settlements, if I go back, they keep mushrooming, growing all the time. Then came the wall. Today, the wall actually surrounds Bethlehem from three sides. You have checkpoints, over 28 checkpoints on Bethlehem land. If I want to go from one village to the other, I have to go through Israeli checkpoint. Right now, even Israel has gates on 3 roads of Bethlehem going out of Bethlehem. They open it in the morning and they close it in the afternoon. It's like a big prison. And so this is right now, the blue is the current construction of Jewish settlements currently. So actually you can see 86% of Bethlehem County is today either under Israeli military control or either under Jewish settler control. Only 14% of our own land is under our control. This is settler colonialism. So this is not just something, a theory. This is what we live actually on a daily basis. And so if you want really to understand what's happening, the best thing is the Swiss cheese. Israel gets the cheese, that's the land and the resources, and the Palestinians are pushed in the holes, and Bethlehem basically is one of these holes. Again, this leads to apartheid, which is why Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, but even the Jewish human rights organization B'Tselem says this is apartheid, according to international law. And the fifth, so just to come to an end of this part, is what I call sealing the settler colonial project. And this is happening with this current Israeli government under Netanyahu. And you know, in his coalition, this sentence that he tweeted is the first sentence in the agreement of this coalition. Benjamin Netanyahu writes, "These are the basic lines of the national government headed by me. The Jewish people have an exclusive and unquestionable right to all areas of the land of Israel." Now, the land of Israel means historic Palestine. Okay? So exclusive and unquestionable, which means as a Christian, as a Palestinian Christian, whose ancestors have been living there for thousands of years, I am alien. Recognized settler colonialism, the settlers become the native, and the native become the alien. So I have no rights suddenly in that land, and I'm not allowed to even question that. And by the way, not only me, people on the hill will not dare to question it. This is why it says unquestionable. And then he continues, the government will promote and develop settlement in all parts of historic Palestine, in the Galilee, the Negev, the Golan, Judea, and Samaria, which means Bethlehem as well. So this is not something they are shy about it or they try to hide it. No, they are very proud, actually, to be a settler colonial state, which led the ultimate settler colonialism leads to genocide. So that is basically one of the last things in settler colonialism is genocide. And we have that in many parts of the world. So today, over 40,000 people are murdered in Gaza, over almost 100,000 injured, and the destruction is just beyond comprehension. And the whole idea actually is to make life unlivable in Gaza, so that the people in Gaza will just have they cannot live there. They have no choice but to voluntarily be displaced. So Israel's ultimate aim is to make life in Gaza a hell, so that those surviving the genocide will have no choice but to seek refuge somewhere else, thus ethnic cleansing Gaza. Again, ethnic cleansing is part of settler colonialism. So that's the first part. I know it's hard to listen to, but I think it's important to understand what we are going through. And so I come to the theological challenges. We are in a church, and I think as a theologian, I always like to think of theology. And I would like to also to share with you 5 questions that are today I'm struggling with, and I think we need all to deal with. The first question is the question about God and humanity. You know, usually at times of war, when people are occupied and they feel the heat of the empire, of the occupiers, often they have a question that keeps popping up, which is, God, where are you? And you know, even in context of genocide, God seems to be not listening. Right? I mean, in Gaza, God is not even moving a finger. He's not coming to defend the people that are being killed there. He seems to be absent-minded. And so people keep asking, God, where are you? Why don't you do something? I mean, for God's sake, even a ceasefire, God is not able to bring to us. And, you know, President Biden has been talking about ceasefire now for what, 2-3 months? And it's not happening. Interestingly enough, the people in Gaza are not asking, God, where are you? In fact, if you listen to what they are saying, God is my defender. Their question now is a totally different one. Where is the Arab world? Where is the Muslim world? Where is the church? Where are all of these countries talking about human rights and promoting human rights? This is the question that actually the people in Gaza are asking. So the people in Gaza did not feel abandoned by God, but they felt abandoned by humanity. Their silence, the silence of the word, is deafening. The people in Gaza did not lose their faith in God, but they lost their faith in humanity. And I think we need, as theologians, to think, what does this really mean when people lose their faith in humanity? It's much tougher than losing their faith in God. So that's the first question I think we need to deal with. The second question is the question about human rights. It's connected to the first one. Because, I mean, the human rights chart is supposed to be universal. This is the whole idea. You know, after Second World War, the world came together and they thought we need to create some parameters for human rights, what countries and people can do and what they are not allowed to do. But when it comes to Palestine, Palestinians are pushed to wonder if human rights are really universal. Do they apply to all persons, irrespective of their race, ethnicity, color, gender, or religion? They were exposed to the rationale of those Western so-called democratic countries who were pulling resources together to defend the Ukrainian against the Russian oppression, while in their case, those same countries were siding with the state of Israel as occupier. So why is that? Is it because the Ukrainians have blue eyes and blonde hair? Or what? And so today, if you come, you have to imagine that all governments, including USAID, they have poured billions of dollars to teach Palestinians human rights. All projects on human rights were fully funded. But when we needed these people to come and defend our human rights, they were not there. The third question is about genocidal theology. And here I come back to Joshua. So remember, we started with Ben-Gurion doing Bible study about Joshua. Dayan, after 67, thinking himself Joshua. And this is exactly what Netanyahu also thinking. On October 27th of last year, when Netanyahu ordered the Israeli military to enter into Gaza, in the press conference on that day, he said, "You must remember what Amalek has done to you, says our Holy Bible." He was referring to 1 Samuel 15:3, where God is saying, "Now go and smite Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass." So again, Netanyahu thinking of himself being Joshua, that is basically should do the ethnic cleansing in the name of God. By the way, that's not only politicians. Today also rabbis actually are using this terminology. Here I have only one example from Rabbi Dov Lior, who is saying basically the same thing. And this brings me to the fourth point, which is the warrior God and the warrior state. You know, the whole idea of holy war, which we find in the Bible, it's a terrible idea, but I thought we got rid of that idea, but it seems it's coming back. The warrior God. And you know, in the theology of liberation in Latin America, people concentrated on the book of Exodus, God liberating his people from coming out of bondage, out of Egypt, right? They really didn't care about what happened afterwards. What happened actually when these people entered Canaan and they had to replace the native people. That was never an issue in liberation theology, but I think this really should be a main issue. So God the warrior becomes more visible in the book of Joshua, in the conquest of Canaan, and in the book of Judges. And actually, the warrior God is not something that is done by Israeli soldiers now, but it's also troublesome when I hear Hamas fighters, when they fire missiles using the word of God. That is also troublesome. The warrior God. We have enough wars. I mean, pushing war also on God is definitely not what we need. And here, allow me towards the end to quote a very important philosopher of our time from Africa, Achille Mbembe, where he said, "War has become not the exception, but a permanent state, the sacrament of our era." War as the sacrament of our era. And he added, what we experience in Gaza, he called it necropolitics. Necro is the Greek word for death, necropolitics. Weapons are deployed in the interest of maximum destruction of persons and the creation of death worlds. New and unique forms of social existence in which vast populations are subjected to conditions of life conferring upon them the status of living dead. This is exactly what's happening in Gaza. People in Gaza are living dead. And so, to end, decolonizing Palestine and decolonizing the Bible, they go hand in hand. Because unfortunately, the Bible have been weaponized against our people. And we need to crack that software. Palestine is not only occupied by military power, what I call the hardware, but also by the software, which is often the Bible or religion. And so we need to crack that theology that actually is still bringing destruction, wars to many parts of the world, including Palestine. So, dear friends, we have so much to do as theologians, as politicians, as human beings, really to bring justice, peace, and reconciliation to our part of the world. But to do that, we need to understand really what the issue is. And the issue, as I tried to share, is settler colonialism. We have to end that settler colonial ideology and politics so that Israeli and Palestinians, Christian, Jews, and Muslims can share the land on equal footing. Thank you very much.
And if you have, there we go. If you have a question, hold it up if you've written it up, and an usher will come and pick one up. We'll go through these. If you have a question that you work on as we go, continue to hold your hand up. There are a few here that are saying they have questions. I'll start with a couple of questions, and then we'll look at some of the ones that have come in, and as we have time, get to those also. I want to pick up on the comment you made and your last point in a way about how the Bible has been weaponized. You said very memorably that God didn't give the land to the Jews, the Lord God didn't give the land to the Jews, but Lord Balfour did. The problem is many Americans and people around the world, but particularly Americans, believe God did give that land to Israel. Say a little bit about this and how much of a problem this is in the development of American policy towards Palestine.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you know, people of Jewish faith has been always part of Palestine. So our problem is not with people of Jewish faith. They were part of the Palestinian people until 1948. We were sharing the land, Christians, Muslims, and Jews. Our problem is when people today say that God gave the Israeli the land, they mean to support settler colonialism. So our problem is with the idea of settler colonialism. For Jews to be part of Palestine, I mean, welcome. That is not, for us, not the problem. But to be there as colonizer, and we as the colonized, to push us out, that is our problem. And when people try to justify settler colonialism with the Bible, which Christian Zionists do, this is very troublesome because, you know, how can you actually separate the divine rights from human rights? Can we, as people of faith, allow for the human rights to be violated in the name of God? This is what Daesh, ISIS is doing. Christian Zionists are doing something similar, and so we have to be very careful.
We have a couple of questions here about Israeli attitudes and thinking, and one person asking about many Israelis criticize West Bank settlements and denounce some of that, and also some people asking about the role of Israeli Arabs. Talk a little bit about your sense of the Israeli population now and the sense of division and different attitudes about settler colonialism?
I think that unfortunately, I would say, and here my colleague maybe from Nazareth can say more to that, but my feeling is that the majority of the Israeli population right now are supporting the assault on Gaza, and the peace camp is almost non-existent. However, in this country, many young Jewish people are totally unhappy with what Israel is doing, and they are against the settler colonial project, and actually they support equality and the end of occupation and reconciliation. So I think in this country I see more voices among Jews who are for a different kind of living together than currently in Israel. But ultimately, Israeli have to deal with the Palestinian issue. I think what October 7th taught us is that Netanyahu was thinking and was saying that publicly, that the Palestinian issue is not important. Let's make peace with the Gulf states, and people will forget about Palestine. October 7th taught us nobody can actually bypass the Palestinian people. We are there to stay, and Israel has to deal with us, and we need to deal with Israel at the same time.
You talked some about the period of negotiation and how during that period actually it accelerated the taking of lands. But it also seemed like during that period there was a stronger, back to Israeli public opinion, support for some sort of settlement. And certainly here in the U.S., we perceived that a deal was close. Right. Say a little bit about that period in the late 90s when that was happening, attitudes in Israel, how they've changed, and were we close to some agreement that would have worked at that point?
Maybe people might think that the assassination of Rabin by right-wing Jewish extremists was actually to make sure that no Palestinian state will evolve. But yeah, I think that time was at least a time where people on both sides thought that peace is, close, and we can do it, like Obama. Yes, we can, right? I think this was the mood of that time. Unfortunately, I think that the settler colonial ideology took over. And this is why I like to look back and to say, from day one, it was a settler colonial project. And the Oslo was like an interlude, but it did not really change the dynamic of the settler colonial state.
We have a question about one of the things I think that makes this issue feel complicated for a lot of people, the problem of terrorism. And one question is, what would be the proper response to this horrible attack that Hamas made last October, and to Hamas in general? How would you answer that?
I mean, the history did not start on October 7th. This is what I was trying to show. And so let me answer it maybe through the Bible, okay? Because at the time of Jesus, Palestine was under imperial occupation, right? Not Israeli, but Roman occupation. And who were the terrorists of that time? The Zealots, right? In the Bible we have them, the Zealots, right? They were Jewish, fighting the empire. And if you go to Israel, Zealots are celebrated everywhere, which tells me as long as there will be occupation, there will be always resistance. The question is what kind of resistance? And is armed resistance the best way or not? I personally, I'm not for armed resistance because, you know, remember the story when Jesus told Peter, put your sword. Though Jesus included zealots in his disciples, which is interesting. So he included them with the hope that maybe there can be a different alternatives. But I tell you, you know, if we want to fight terrorism, the best way is to offer people hope. But when people think that it's hopeless, you know, they tried everything. Nobody is listening to them. You know, the people on the hill, you know, are deaf. You know, the church is not doing anything. The Islamic world, they are in Lululand, etc., etc. They think, what options do we have? You know, so we need to offer people hope that if we want to fight terrorism. Fighting terrorism with more military power is counterproductive because actually it's this military power that keeps creating more and more terrorism. So state terrorism and individual terrorism, they feed each other. So we need to fight both.
Well, and just say a little more on that general philosophy. What could Israel have done in specific ways? Perhaps a limited military response, then stopping, or what? You know, they saw themselves as having to respond in some forceful way. Any thoughts on how to define what that might be?
No, it's very difficult for me to answer that. But, you know, this is not the first assault on Gaza.
Yes.
This was the most terrible one. But every 2-3 years, Israel is doing that. And they do it also to test their latest weapons in this war, AI-operated weapons. So today, actually, it's artificial intelligence that is taking decision where to strike. Imagine, so people are giving up their responsibility and giving it to artificial intelligence, and then Israel will sell this equipment saying they were tested on real ground. So I fear Israel, as a settler colonial state, they need always wars, even if there is no excuse, you know. Mm-hmm. But this will not help. You know what? These people who attacked Israel last year, they were children during the first war on Gaza. They saw their homes being destroyed, their parents killed. They wanted to revenge. And I tell you, those kids in Gaza right now, what they have went through, it will not be fun for Israel, you know. But let me end with this, maybe on this issue. I think the politics of Netanyahu is very short-sighted. Many Jewish people, even if they support the war, they are fed up with the state of Israel. As Jewish people, they don't want, you know, to close their companies and their businesses and go chase people in Gaza. Why for? I mean, every 2-3 years, you know, they want to live. They want to have a cappuccino in a cafe and so on, and not to be sent to Gaza. And so many of them right now, like many Palestinians, many Christians, Palestinian, unfortunately, are going to Cyprus, buying homes there, going to Turkey, to Greece. And so the land is losing its best people on both sides. And I'm afraid that at the end of the day, actually, who will survive are Shas and Hamas. And they can build a country built on God's law, and the Sharia and the Torah, and God help us as a pastor, I say.
Thank you. Yeah. There's a question about the general idea of peace through development. Reference to China doing that, and the BRICS nations, and in the Middle East, some other general interest in global security and development. Are there efforts in this regard, and maybe thinking about after the rebuilding of Gaza, after this terrible violence ends, but the general idea of development, peace through development.
Yeah, actually, totally failed. It's a failed politics because you cannot replace dignity by throwing money on people. What people need are really their dignity, and they need their equality. And then development is needed, definitely needed. But we need people to be even engaged in this development. We need them to have agency. But first, we have to give them the feeling, yes, they are equal human beings. They are created in the image of God. As humans, they have unalienable rights, and this is what we need to give them. And I think this is what the Palestinians are thirsty for.
There's also a question sort of about the general idea of nonviolent activism, and to the extent that this is a philosophy being taught in the West Bank. I've heard of some people with efforts. Is there hope for this playing a significant role in the future?
I mean, definitely. But again, I think sometimes we feel that nonviolence is like it will solve everything. It doesn't. But for me personally, nonviolent is important because violence can easily become a culture. And if it becomes a culture, it kills you. It kills those who are exercising violence. We see that in Israel. You know, I mean, the Jewish settlers the Jewish soldiers who used to go and, you know, exercise violence against the Palestinian people ended up exercising violence against their wives at home. And there are studies on that. Because once violence takes over you, it's over. And so this is why, to keep sane, I'm for nonviolence, but for creative resistance. Because nonviolence, I don't like the term actually, because you are negating the negative. We call it in the Kairos document creative resistance, and this is what I think is needed. Creativity is needed to make peace. Without creativity, no peace, no justice.
Perhaps finally here, there are a couple of questions about the role of the church and sort of what churches in America can do. I know there's some efforts. We're going to hear from churches for Middle East peace here in a moment. What do you say that can be done to church folks who care about what's happening, and what organized efforts are you aware of, or do we need in order to really make a difference in terms of U.S. policy?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think there are some courageous churches in this country that really stood up to speak truth to power. And the Presbyterian Church, since we are in a Presbyterian church, is one of them, I have to say. Because often we don't recognize actually the good things that some churches are doing. But you have on the other side the Christian Zionists that are our nightmare all the time. So I think the first thing churches should do, and this is where I'm involved a lot, is through seminaries, we need to decolonize the Bible. It is very important because the colonial Bible became, unfortunately, part of our DNA. And we need to crack that. So theological work is needed. And my book is just one small contribution in that regard. The second is it's important to create bridges to the people in Palestine in general and to the Palestinian Christians in particular. To go there and visit and see with your own eyes. Once you go there, you understand. Better than reading 10 books, though still I hope you will read my book, but still, you know, we need to do some advertisement. This is the country of advertisement, you know, so You have always to interrupt and do some advertisements. So really, especially visits are really very important. The third is raising awareness in this country. And I think this lecture is just one great example what a church can do. And maybe the last is really support viable and creative project there that help the resilience of the people. Because at the end of the day, we need to support the resilience of the people. I mean, you know, the Palestinian people are very resilient people. I think if it were another group of people, they have given up maybe a long time ago. They don't. Very resilient. And the resilience is part of our DNA. And this is something I always tell our people we have to celebrate. We call that sumud, yeah? So we need to support the sumud of our people so that they will not lose hope, they will not give up, but they will continue to believe in a just peace for everyone.
Thank you so much, Mitri, very much. We want to continue looking here in the time we have remaining at sort of efforts to particularly mobilize people of faith and others in support of some of the goals that he's identified. And we'll ask Mitri to come back here in the end and just say some final words and give us a benediction. But before that, I want to introduce Kyle Christopholo from Churches for Middle East Peace, talk a little bit about their work and introduce some guests that are here. So Kyle?
Thank you, everyone, for being with us tonight. Thank you, Mitri, for your words. They are always powerful and push us to find the places that we can use our particular voices to advocate for peace and justice. And so thanks to Theo and the McClendon Scholar Program, to Reverend Sarah and the New York Avenue Presbyterian Church for hosting us. I wanted to briefly just introduce, for those of you who are based here in DC and joining us virtually online, ways that you can take Reverend Mitri's challenge to raise awareness and to use your voices here in the U.S. on behalf of a just peace in Israel-Palestine. My name is Kyle Christopholo, and I work with Churches for Middle East Peace. CMAP is a U.S.-based advocacy nonprofit. We are a coalition of 35 national Christian denominations and organizations, including the Presbyterian Church USA, one of our founding members. But we are broadly ecumenical with Catholic, Evangelical, Orthodox, and Protestant denominations comprised of our membership. And we work with churches to equip them with ways to deconstruct a bit of what Mitri was saying, scripture, as well as to find ways that they can amplify their voices on behalf of justice. So we talk about our work in three ways. We educate, so a primary part of our work is educating U.S. Christians on what's happening in the Middle East, elevating the voices of peacemakers on the ground like Reverend Mitri and like the guest that I'm going to introduce in just a moment, and advocate. So how, again, can we use our voices to push U.S. policies that will help result in a just and lasting peace in Israel-Palestine and throughout the region? And so we work closely with Mitri over the years, and I've been honored to host him in DC on several occasions to help bring his voice to Capitol Hill. It just so happens that he's here at a time when we are helping to host another set of Palestinian Christian leaders in Washington, D.C. And so when I found out that this event was happening, it was gracious that Reverend Mitri and New York Avenue Presbyterian Church let us join you all for a few minutes to hear from the voices of the two Palestinian Christians that we are having with us in Washington, D.C. this week. So you can move to the next slide. For those of you who are on your computer, it might be a little easier for you to have that QR code, but if you are interested in learning more about CMAP and the ways that you can learn about our resources, we have curriculums that we provide for churches if you're interested in doing that as part of a small group. We have trips to the region that we sponsor. We have advocacy conferences that we host. So if you use that QR code, you can find out the different resources we have. I will just quickly plug that on October 6th, we are offering resources for churches in what we're calling a Solidarity Sunday. So there are prayers, videos, ways that you can insert liturgy into your church service to, again, offer prayers for peace and justice and an end to this violence. So briefly, again, you can go to the next slide. We're really excited that we have with us Dr. Lama Mansour, who is a social scientist. She just received her doctorate from Oxford University and is a Palestinian citizen of Israel living in Nazareth. And Father Fadi Diab, who is rector of 2 Anglican parishes in Ramallah and Birzeit. And so they are both Palestinian Christians, but with Dr. Mansour being a Palestinian citizen of Israel, and Father Fadi being a Palestinian West Bank resident, they have many similarities, but also experience life very differently. And so wanted to invite both of them up to just offer some brief words, and then we'll conclude again with Mitri. So I'll have you, Dr. Mansour, come up first, and then Father Diab.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having us this evening and for showing up on a Tuesday, I think it is, and with the debate and everything. So thank you. I had planned on something a bit different, but I think with how the conversation went and some of the things that were said, I kind of wanted to shine a light on the Palestinian citizens of Israel, such as myself. Sometimes you'll hear about us in the media being referred to as Israeli Arabs. You'll hear the words Arabs of 48. You'll hear the words Arabs in the interior. You'll hear the words Arabs or Palestinians inside the Green Line. And this is because we are 20% of the Israeli citizen population, but we are Palestinian. We are Palestinian by culture. We are Palestinian by heritage. We speak Arabic as our native language. So we have this weird identity that is composed of at least 4 things, 4 different components. By ethnicity, we're Arab. By nationality, we're Palestinian. By religion, we're either Christian, Muslim, or Druze. And by citizenship, we're Israeli. Under Israeli law, we're supposedly equal, but in practice, this is very different. There are dozens of laws that implicitly or explicitly discriminate against us. So one example of this that maybe you can read about at home is the nation-state law that was passed in 2018 that reserved the right of national self-determination to Jewish citizens only. It's a very short law. You can look it up and read it. But it enshrined in law what we know for a really, really long time, that we are not equal in Israeli society. We form about 20% of the population, as I said. We live in segregated towns and villages, very, very separate from the Jewish towns. We have been systematically de-developed. These towns, since 1948, there isn't one Palestinian town that has been built inside of Israel, but the population has more than tripled, so you can see how that can form a lot of overcrowding. We're not allowed to expand or grow. But as Reverend Mitri was speaking about, we have incredible sumud. We are also resilient. The most educated group inside Israel is Palestinian Christian women. We are the most educated group in the country. And this is part of our resilience. This is part of our planning for the future. I'll briefly say something about since October 7th. Since October 7th, sympathy for Gazans, for the people of Gaza, has been criminalized inside Israel. I have friends who have been arrested for simply posting on social media saying, "Our hearts are in Gaza." The police chief said in the beginning of the war, whoever wants to have sympathy for Gaza is welcome to. I'll put them on a bus and send them to Gaza. So this has been the climate inside of Israel, talking about a democratic state. This has been the atmosphere inside of Israel for Palestinian citizens of Israel. We have been living in a climate of fear and intimidation and persecution. Even being with you here this evening is not easy for us. And I'll just lastly, as we are in a church, I will say that Christian Zionism, as Reverend Mitri talked about in detail, I think the most important thing for us is that it dehumanizes us. It either completely ignores us, ignores our existence in the land for centuries, or it demonizes us as hurdles in God's plan, in Christ's, return to the earth. So, if nothing else to take away from this, we have all of the biblical arguments why Christian Zionism is, let's say, not correct. But there's a very, very human element that it's hurting your brothers and sisters in Palestine. And if that's not enough, then I don't know which Jesus you worship. I leave you with that. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. First, New York Avenue Presbyterian Church for hosting this event, Reverend Sarah, and the community and everyone attending this evening. I think, as Kyle mentioned, we are here hosted by Churches for Middle East Peace to advocate for the Palestinian cause, especially with senators and representatives on the Hill. It's not been easy, to tell you the least, but we continue to keep going, as this is a long journey, we know, but we know that it's the right journey to walk. I think Reverend Mitri, as always, gave you a very crystal clear analysis of the context, both in Gaza and the West Bank, as well as the importance of to take into consideration the theological challenges that need a lot of digestion into our theology, into our churches, as we take them with us and discuss them with each other. I would like just to mention the church in Palestine. When I say the church, I mean the community, not the institution. Of course, the institution is there, but the Christian community in Palestine, especially after the first week of October and the hardships that they have seen in Gaza as well as in the West Bank, they're very much tired. And I think many of them are in despair, and that's why we have witnessed many families leaving from mainly the Bethlehem area, but also other areas in Palestine. On a daily basis, we receive calls from Christians from different parts of the West Bank who ask us on ways how to find a way to immigrate and to leave the Holy Land, and no one blames them. Life is very difficult. And you have seen the map of Jerusalem, the map of Bethlehem, and how the Israeli forces control every road, every exit, every enter of that area and every area. And beside that, now we have an increase in settler violence against Palestinians inside the West Bank. I myself, 3 weeks ago, was attacked by settlers on the way from Jericho to Ramallah with my son in the car. It was a horrible attack. Thank God we were not injured, but eventually the aim was towards killing us on that sneaky way road from Jericho to Ramallah. And this is happening on a daily basis on the roads in the West Bank. So unless it is urgent, people don't travel from one place to another. And that's why many people lost their jobs, many people cannot reach their working place, which increased the economic challenges for many Palestinians, including the Christian communities. And that is why one part of, I mean, there is of course the challenges, but also there are the challenges, but there are also the resilience that Father Mitri and Loma talked about, and we have seen Palestinians now taking a shift from depending on working in Israel to starting their own projects in their own land, which is something good. And there are some organizations that support these projects so that people continue to be dependent on themselves rather being dependent on working on Israel and dependent on permits. The last thing I want to mention is Reverend Mitri talked about settler colonialism. And we know that throughout history, settler colonialism has always been supported by imperial control and domination. And what is happening in Palestine is a settler colonial project that has always been enforced, supported, encouraged, and covered up by imperial domination, whether that is the UK or now the modern-day empire, the US. And I think this is where I would like to bring the church. So as a church, whether in the United States or in Palestine, our mission is not easy. Because you're in the heart of the empire, and challenging the empire can be a difficult process. And for us in the Middle East, also it's not easy because the empire controls not only the occupying settler colonial power, but also controls the different forces in the region. And this is where new colonialism is functioning in the Arab world, and with the leaders that has been sucked into that imperial consciousness. So I know it's not easy, but I would like to take from the ministry of Jesus and from the first disciples in Jerusalem and the church that spread from Jerusalem into the rest of the world, the concept of community. And I think this is where it is very important that we form a community. And when I say a community, I don't mean communities, different communities, but I mean an alternative community that is formed by different communities, but a community that understands the signs of times, a community that supports its members, a community that functions in a way that subverts the way of the empire. And that is where our friends, brothers, siblings in the United States are very much needed. They're needed to strengthen the Palestinian community. They're needed to bring in more people to form that community that would work for the kingdom of God. I'll stop here. It's been really amazing to be with all of you tonight. And as always, we learn from Mitri new things. And as always, we're encouraged by your presence, because I do believe that community is hope. So you are a sign and the power and the force of hope for all of us back in the Holy Land. Thank you very much.
As we come to the end of our time here, we want to take just a moment, tell you a little bit more about how you can follow up with some of what Mitri has talked about, learn more about it, and you see a list here of some of his many books. Mitri Raheb has written many books, and I just select here 5 of them to mention. You can Google his name and books, and a long list come up, so you don't have to memorize all this, but these are some that give you a sense of the range of his work. Bethlehem Besieged, Stories of Hope in Troubled Times, a book on Christianity in the Middle East, Sailing Through Troubled Waters, The Cross in Context, which he wrote with Suzanne Watts Henderson, who some of you know, who we've had here also, and Politics of Persecution, and then his 5th book listed there, which he made reference to, Decolonizing Palestine, the Land, the People, and the Bible. This is his newest book. I'm in the process of reading it myself. I strongly recommend it to you, and you are in luck. We have some copies here tonight in the back and the narthex as you leave. If you're interested in purchasing a copy, we do not have our Visa MasterCard machine, so you'll have to pay with cash. But $20 for this book, and I strongly recommend it to you as you go out, or you can order all of these, of course, online. The other thing I just want to call your attention to is the Bright Stars of Bethlehem, which both Reverend Sarah Johnson mentioned and Mitri mentioned in his remarks. This is the umbrella organization based here in the United States that supports many projects in Palestine, in the West Bank, in Bethlehem. And I urge you to go to the website. You see it there, brightstarsbethlehem.com. It is an inspiring website just to see what they're doing, the many kinds of projects they're involved in. And if you want to put some energy and some resources into supporting something doing good in this troubled region of the world, I really recommend Bright Stars of Bethlehem to you, and certainly urge you to go read about them. All right, as we come to a close, I want to invite Mitri to come back with some final words and to offer us a benediction.
Yeah, thank you, Theo. Actually, I spoke as a theologian this evening, but let me end with my other hat, which is being the president of Dar al-Kalima University, the first and only university in all of Palestine with a focus on arts, culture, and design. And actually, we are the only university in the West Bank that used to have a campus in Gaza. And that campus was unfortunately destroyed during Holy Week, the last week of March of this year. We lost several of our staff, students, but still right now we have 36 staff people in Gaza, all of them displaced, some of them displaced for the 12th time during these 11. And they are refusing to sit even as displaced people and just to be depressed, because they think depressed people cannot change the world. And so, though they are displaced, they are working with over 3,600 kids in art therapy. And last week I had, or 2 weeks ago now, we had a Zoom call. We could assemble 8 of them at the same time. Usually we do one-on-one. But we assembled 8 of them, and my colleague in Bethlehem and I, we were really troubled. What can we tell them? I mean, how can we offer them hope? And so we had this Zoom, and at the end, I looked at my colleague and said, we were really worried what to tell them, and we ended up receiving from them so much hope. They had their strategic plan, that what they wanted to do, and they said, it's not enough to work with kids. The mother are telling us, they need art therapy, so we would like to expand our work with women. I said, this is Palestine. And so with all what's going on, I think we have something to celebrate again, which is, this culture of life. And one I would like to end with this image that they sent to me. They sent kids in these refugee camps, displaced kids, to bring some of the rubbles and then to build small homes and then to color them yellow and red and blue and green, because we want to defeat this culture of destruction that the empire is bringing by offering this culture of construction, of hope. And so please think of all of these kids in Gaza that are committed to life. Palestine gave Jesus to the world. I think it's high time for the world to give justice to Palestine. And allow me to end with a benediction. I will do it in Arabic, if that's okay. يبارككم الرب ويحرسكم. يضيء الرب وجهه عليكم ويرحمكم. يرفع الرب وجهه عليكم ويمنحكم سلاما أبديا. باسم الآب والابن والروح القدس الإله الواحد. آمين. Go in peace, serve the Lord.